Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Super Sunday here on Apex Racing TV and the Weekend Warriors series, where first up, as always, we've got the Formula Fords. My name is Ron Mullins. Alongside me in the commentary booth is Charles Bichelle, and in the virtual production hall we have our old buddy Josh Wilkie. We welcome you all to the next round of the season here at Motorsports Arena Oschersleben. I was talking about this track with my colleague Charles right before the start of this broadcast, and I really compared it to being like an oversized go-kart track, and it's also a track that I have mixed feelings about. There's a lot of sections that tend to annoy drivers, whether it be in the sim or even real life for that matter, and some commentators as well, if anyone knows of that infamous moment where John Cleland, the former British touring car driver, said that the person who designed the first corner here at this track should be taken into a dark room and being will know that this track is very divisive in its design. However, I personally find it a little bit entertaining, but I've never seen a race here myself, although I have driven in some here in the sim. Now, Charles, you're in the same boat as me. We haven't really done a broadcast here at this track, but he compared some sections here of this track to other ones that we'll be visiting here on this schedule. So how do you think this race is going to be like?
Yeah, you know, it is my first time watching a race here, but I came in early and watched a lot of practice, just kind of get a feel for the track layout. And yeah, the kind of the pit straight section kind of reminded me a little bit of Roots-Gogan, how it just kind of darts into that little left-hander, and then before it goes into the open, you know, right-hander in turn 2 to get you down for that next straightaway. So there's some similarities, but obviously I think there's a little bit of differences. Not quite as much elevation change on this track as there would be on Roots-Gogan. So this is very much more of a German track. So if you compare it to say maybe. It's got more elevation than I was going to say Hockenheim. It's got a lot more elevation than Hockenheim. That's basically flat. But yeah, it's going to be it'll be a very unique challenge for the drivers. Obviously, this is now I think a free track on iRacing, so lots of drivers should have the opportunity to get some practice races in this week, or some official races in this week. And so we'll see what happens with this. I'm interested to see how this race is going to turn out. But with these Formula Ford racers, the Weekend Warrior Series, they're always put on a good show. It's always entertaining, and so I'm looking forward to it.
I think this is going to be a pretty good race. There's a lot of sections of this track, that being one. This section is actually called McDonald's, which is kind of bizarre. I'm not sure if McDonald's approved of the sponsorship of that. Of course, Apex Racing TV is not a sponsored or affiliated in any way, shape, or form with McDonald's as a corporation, but still, it's a very, some interesting corner names here at this track of Oschersleben here. And you mentioned there Rodskogen being very similar in the first few corners here of this track. That'll actually be the circuit that we're visiting in 1 week's time here for the Weekend Warriors Formula Ford Series. So anyone watching the stream here on Apex Racing TV, you may want to stick around for that in 1 week's time, because that is going to be interesting. And speaking of interesting, I think that's a good way to describe how the season has been so far. And of course, Canadian Tire last time at rain affected with a lot of UFO abductions as well. As actually, here's a funny note. I think he won't mind me saying this. So Stevie Ray, who does a fantastic job organizing both of these Weekend Warriors series as well as the Ray Esports series here on Tuesdays on Apex Racing TV, told us in confidence, he just let us know over the past week that there is a new drop round being added to the points for these drivers after the UFO abductions that we saw last time at Canadian Tire, and I let him know that him using the term alien abductions made me overly happy. So that was a nice funny moment from this week. But speaking of the championship points, I think we may run through that now with about 6 minutes left to go here in this qualifying session. The standings are very tight across all three categories. We've seen some pretty up and down stuff so far, and it's currently Sam Spinell at the top of the qualifying session as things stand at the moment, and I believe he's at the top of some of the championship standings as well. We'll bring those up for you right now. It's actually Jason Green at the top of the S1 category as things stand at the moment. Only 2 points separating himself and Simon Ball there at the front. Then you've got Yanchi Lin in third at 328 points, tied with himself and Michael McConnell there in P3 and P4. Then Sam Spinell is actually down in fifth, despite taking, I think, three checkered flags of the 5 races so far this season. He's actually P5 in the S1 points. As things stand at the moment, then we move on to S2. I think I'll let you handle this, Charles.
Absolutely. So in Spec 2, David Floyd leads with 297 points. Peter True's just 13 points back. Julian Ditchburn 1 point back of that, so still tied up in the podium positions. Adam Barney is in fourth with 221. Then we have Philip Fernandez with 214. And then further down the list, we've got Paul Stevens, Tim Stano, Pedro Carvalho, Wilson Brother Roscoe, and Chris Montgomery rounding out your top 10 in Spec 2.
And still pretty close in that class as well. Masters as well, incredibly close. Brad Cathcart there at the front at 282 points on the board right now. Only 4 ahead of Dana Bose there in P number 2. Then Jim Brewster a little bit farther back. However, he's involved in a nice fight between himself and Chris Murakami there between P3 and P4. Then you've got Alan DeGassis rounding at the top 5 there at 235 points. And you've got Reese and Monty in P6 and P7, which is a little bit shocking, but actually not real. On paper, it's surprising because these two drivers are usually the ones trading blows at the front of these fields. However, they've had some pretty disastrous rounds as of late. They didn't have the best showing a few weeks ago at Brands Hatch. I believe it was Antonio Reese running out of fuel and Jorg Mani getting involved in an incident. And I think Antonio Reese and Jorg Mani were both abducted into a UFO last time out at Canadian Tire. So those two currently P6 and P7 in the Masters points. Will look to try and turn things around here as we approach the second half of the season, this being round 6 of the season at Oschersleben. We don't have a whole lot of time left to go until it's going to be absolute crunch time for all of these drivers, and we're still approaching crunch time here in this qualifying session. It's still Spinell at the front, Monty P4 and top of the Masters as things stand at the moment, and Stano in P number 9. So we're kind of seeing what we saw at Canadian Tire a few weeks ago, with the field being quite mixed up as things stand at the moment, Charles.
Yeah, it really is. Maybe just because it's still fairly new, this track, and it's just now became a free track on iRacing. So it's probably still new to a lot of the drivers. So it's you can see that some other it's kind of mixed field. Normally some names that we see up the top most of the time, and then others that are further down the list.
think what we may do here while we're still in the qualifying session, about 2.5 minutes left on the board, I think we may try and ride on board with some of these drivers just to give you a pseudo tour here of the circuit with many twists, turns, and flares as well. So I believe that was Lou Holly, I believe, going off there, heading through turn number 12, a very tricky corner. This is Benjamin Harris, who's currently 23rd as things stand at the moment in this qualifying session. Not an ideal result if you're the S1 driver, but you're heading through turn number 1, the old school turn number 1, so we're not using the one that John McClelland said the track designer needs to be being over as a result. Then we're going into turn number 2, which is a tricky corner where a lot of different lines can be run. You can try and swing for the outside and carry a lot of speed. You could try and keep it a little bit tight. We'll just have to wait and see. Then turn number 3, which from my experience driving in a Toyota GR86 race a few weeks ago, that is a pain in my butt. I didn't get that corner right at all in the 2 races I did in that afternoon. Then we're heading through a really fun section here of turn 4, 5, and 6, where you don't really know where the apex is supposed to be. It is 3 corners. They call it the triple for a reason. However, there are many different lines you can run, and it's really treated like one separate section. Then they head through turn number 7. The long, it basically feels like it lasts forever. That was going through the right-hander a few corners ago. Then you go through turn 8 and 9. That's a fun section. Then through 10, where if you hit that inside curb, you're going to be in for a world of hurt. This is turn number 11, one of the heaviest braking zones here on this circuit. Before you go into this stretched out chicane, I think it could best be described as a normal chicane if it approached the event horizon of a black hole. Then you go into the second to last corner here, turn number 13, lucky number 13, where I've seen plenty of drivers make mistakes in the past. Then this final corner, which is equally tricky there. You've got that killer curb on the inside that can throw you off into the gravel trap if you just look at the wrong way here. So that's a nice quick little tour of Oschersleben, an interesting track for sure, and we're going to be seeing plenty of these drivers try and tackle the challenge. From that small little track guide we just did, Charles, what do you think is going to be the corner that bites these drivers the most here in this 40-minute race we have coming up?
Well, because we have a 40-minute race and there are pit stops involved, I think turn 1/2, that open right-hander where pit exit comes out basically to the outside of the apex of the corner is going to be very tricky during our pit cycle, just because of, you know, you're battling cars on the track, and now you're got to worry about cars that are getting back out there as well. So there's always seems like when we have a situation like that, there's always a little bit of issue with pit entry or exit when we have some of those more tricky layouts. And so that's what I'm gonna be looking at first and foremost. That little, I guess what you call the stretched out chicane, where it looks like they're basically just cutting the first half of it to try and set up for the second half, is going to be one of those places where somebody's going to brake, and the car behind them doesn't think they need to, and the next thing you know, we'll have a little bit of a kerfuffle there.
I think we're going to see plenty of kerfuffles throughout this race, and you mentioned the pits. That's going to be big as well. We didn't get a chance to mention it here so far in this broadcast, but the pit exit here, oh my god, I think I described it before the start of this broadcast as making the hairpin at Monaco feel like, it makes it feel like a NASCAR super speedway turn number 1. Talladega comes to mind since NASCAR's running there right now, but where the checkered flag has been out in this qualifying session for about 1 minute and 10 seconds. Sam Spinell there is still at the front. It's looking very good for him, unless Yanchi Lin can pull something out of the bag here, coming to the line to take the checkered flag here. Does he improve on that qualifying time? He does, but only hops up to P number 2, actually displaces Aero Gnome there, who is in second for the very longest time you could here in this 20-minute long qualifying session. Antonio Reese currently P13 as things stand at the moment. I believe he took the checkered flag already, so he's just getting some more sighting laps. This track has been brand new here for many of these drivers. I think maybe I might be a little bit biased here because I'm kind of mixed on this track. I think I'm okay at it. However, it's not the most enjoyable experience, if I'm being brutally honest. I don't think I would have bought it if it were my money. However, now that's par-based content here in iRacing. Plenty of these drivers getting their first sighting laps and using the time left here until they get yoinked back to the pits to try and just figure out the boundaries here of the circuit, figure out how much they can use that curb there on the inside of turn number number 6. That was Tom Laurie proving my case right there, heading through turn number 7, which I didn't really talk about in our small little track guide there. I was more focused on that section of turn 4, 5, and 6, but turn 7, very tricky as well. With a little bit of banking, we'll see if drivers try and use that to their advantage. But the checkered flag is, well, has been out for quite some time here in this qualifying session. And I think all the cars have been yoinked back to the pit, so I think we may be able to get the starting grid here in the not too distant future from this 40-minute race we have coming up here from the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors. That's going to be Sam Spinell, the Brit, starting this race from the pole at a 1:31.439. That's a decent lap time from him. Yan Shi Lin in P number 2, about 2/10 off, then Aero Gnome in P number 3. Christian Kamanka, who we've seen in the YouTube chat as of late, we haven't really seen him on track. It's nice to see him out on track here in the number 9 car. He'll be starting this race in 4th, and Jason Green in 5th. Jörg Mani, the top of the Masters, in P number 6. Julian Ditchburn, the top of the S2 drivers, in P number 7. Chris Murakami in P8. Bobby West in 9th. Michael McConnell will round out your top 10.
Yeah, P11 is Tim Staino, another one of the Spec 2 drivers. Thor Tello in 12th. Antonio Race and David Foy is on row 7. Adam Barney and Trenton Kramer, row 8. Lou Hawley and Alan DeGassis on row 9. Tom Laurie and Pedro Carvalho round out your top 20. In P21, we've got Bill Walker, Philip Fernandez in 22nd, Benjamin Harris in 23rd, Wilson Brzorowsko in 24th, Dana Bowes and Paul Stevens on row 13, Brad Cathcart and Jeff Jacobson on row 14, Peter True, Manning Grinnan is your top 30, Gary Wolbolt, Nick Tillow, 31st and 32nd, Paul Jackson, Russ Telker, 33rd and 34th, 35th is Johan Batinga, 36th is John Toms, 37th is More Human, and 38th is David Kahn, and that rounds out your 38 car field.
One quick little shout out to Morn Human there in P number 37. I think that's the first time I've seen a South African in one of the broadcasts I've done here on Apex Racing TV in quite some time. It's always nice to see global representation here in this field. You've got drivers racing from all over the world, taking time out of their day to run with drivers that they've run with for quite some time. We always beat on this drum when it comes to the Ray Esports broadcast on Tuesdays, and the same really goes for this broadcast and these races as well. These drivers are very familiar with each other. They know how to push each other to the absolute limit. I'm sure we're going to see that, especially on lap 1 when they careen their way through turn number 1 and turn number 2. I think I've said this on broadcast before, and I'll say it again because it really rings true here at this track. It's like threading the eye of a needle, but the needle's attached to a Saturn V rocket traveling at escape velocity. That is a very tricky section here in these Formula Ford cars, which I think I said earlier on in this broadcast, were basically oversized go-karts. They're kind of like oversized go-karts, oversized shifter carts, whatever you want to call it. You're sliding your way around a lot of these corners here, so it's going to be a whole lot of fun to see these drivers try and maximize their grip, maximize their races here. As I said earlier on in reference to the championship fights, we are approaching, well, we are basically at the midway point of this season, so all these drivers may try and push that envelope a little bit, get a bit aggressive. Charles, I'll pass this off to you before we're about to grab the start here in a few moments' time. Do you think these drivers are going to be a bit more aggressive than we've seen so far this season, with dry track conditions and a bit of an unknown quantity of a racetrack as well?
Yeah, probably, because I think the biggest reason is because these guys have had their fill of rain over the past 2 or 3 weeks. So, to get a nice dry track, one that's not the most open, but there's some places to make some moves here. So I think you'll see people trying to get to the front as quickly as they can.
The good thing here is I think the chance of rain isn't going to go over about 1 or 2% for this entire race. I love seeing rain races. My dad used to describe me as a mudder in reference to the racing I used to do in real life. But I mean, as much as I love rain racing, I'm sure all these drivers are relieved that they don't have any sort of rain to deal with. No curveballs, however. This track, I think, is a curveball in itself. 14 corners, many of which can catch these drivers out. And I think no corner on this track is the same as another. There's so many twists and turns here at this circuit, many sections that'll catch these drivers out. We'll just have to wait and see what this 40-minute race we have coming up that's going to start in just a few moments time has to bring. You can see that Porsche pace car is going to veer off onto pit road, make that veering left-hand turn that we're going to see drivers use quite a lot throughout this race, just trying to widen their approach heading through the final corner. We're riding on board with Spinell, who's going to lead the field to green here in just a few moments time, waiting. The drivers are going through the gears and they're on their way into turn number 1. That's a fantastic start there from Aero Gnome, who's who's now making it 3 wide with himself, Yanchi Lin, and Sam Spinell. Who's that going for the inside move? They're heading into turn number 1. Who's going to back out of it? They have to, but they're going to go 3 wide heading through turn number 1. These drivers have balls of steel on this first lap. They're dancing around the circuit trying to find any way to get past each other and any way to make gains on one another, but still a side-by-side battle that we have between Aeronome and Sam Spinell. Sam Spinell's got that inside line heading through turn number 3. Aeronome may get hung out to dry there, a little bit of banking there on that corner, so it's going to be really hard for drivers stuck on that outside line, but I'm shocked that we didn't see Aeronome get passed by Yanchi Lin, who's feeling really racy as well. Pretty good starts from all of these drivers as well. So far, so clean. Knowing my luck, I probably just jinxed it.
Maybe so. And yeah, that was Christian Kabeka we saw deep on the inside there at the start of the race, looking to see if he could make a cheeky little move on the inside at the start at turn 1. Didn't happen, but wisely backed out of it, just dropped back into 4th place. So he'll be setting himself up now for this long run as we get ready to the halfway point. We can start looking at pit stops.
I think I saw a puff of tire smoke when we looked at that wide angle there as they went through turn number 10 of McDonald's before they went onto the back straightaway. I think I may have already jinxed some driver. I think they may have gone spinning like a top, but so far, no major incidents, some rally action though as they went through turn number 13, hitting that gravel trap, which they don't want to use too much here with the new rework physics that we have here in iRacing. That gravel is going to slow you down like an anchor, especially if you're going out of that final corner. Just get a small little wheel off on that gravel trap, and that's going to drag you down like you're dragging a parachute right behind you. It will not be ideal if you drive just a little bit of, make a tiny bit of mistake, even just, it's a matter of inches separating a driver getting a move done and ending in tears. We'll just have to wait and see. Oh, you can see pit stops already starting. Paul Jackson, who I think may have been one of the drivers involved in some incidents. You can see many drivers already on pit road here, so I think, oh yeah, that's Jeff Jacobson there missing. That is the right rear tire there on the back of that Formula Ford car, so I think we may have had some schmozzles happen behind the leaders.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, also, I don't know if you mentioned Russ Telker is also in the pits as well. So yeah, we've already got a few cars that have been to pit road to get some service, and there's a couple still out there, or a couple still in there. So we'll, as we get a replay here from producer Josh, we're looking here, and I'm kind of glitched out, so I really can't see anything.
Ooh, this is... Ooh, I think this is interesting strategy from Lou Holly. We saw him exiting the pits. He briefly got sucked up into a UFO. I was getting some flashbacks to Canadian Tire last time out. However, he popped back onto the circuit and is still running. I'm not sure what position he's running in. However, he's still out there on the circuit. This, I think, take a look at a replay of Jeff Jacobson. I think this may be glitched from my end here as well. I can see he's now actually...
got it. Yeah, it just kind of looks like he lost the rear and just in the middle of the corner and just slid out across into traffic and just nowhere for a couple of those cars to go. And that is probably going to be the end of their race.
Not ideal for many of those drivers. It's important here in these races just to have a fantastic start. One driver that's had a fantastic start is Aeronome, who's now taken the lead over Sam Spinell. Those two separated by barely any air as things stand at the moment. Only a quarter of a second separating the two of them. However, it's a much bigger gap between those two and Yanchi Lin in P number 3, so he's actually dropping back a little bit, maybe falling into the crutches here of Christian Kabeka in the not too distant future. I will say one thing, I'll say something else as well. The top 23 are currently separated by about 10 seconds. It's actually teetering around that for Brezarosco, who's currently P23 in the 555 car, currently down there outside the top 20, but still the field is incredibly close, and we're going to take a look at the replay of Aeronome pulling off this pass. And I think this is a matter of drivers taking different lines. Aeronome going really deep on the brakes there, and Sam Spinell actually washed out a little bit there. He was trying to... This is something I saw a lot in the GR86's race I did a few weeks ago, not comparing apples to oranges. However, I saw this in that race. I'll carry it over to this one as well. Drivers taking different lines as they head through turn number 1 and 2 there. So we saw Sam Spinell try and go a little bit deep there, kind of round off the corner in a way, make it more like a hairpin instead of just a very long, it feels like a never-ending corner if you're stuck to that inside line coming through turn number 2. So I think Sam Spinell there just went a little bit too deep, and Aeronome was just able to cut down to the inside and get that move done.
Yep, I think you're absolutely right. That's exactly what it looked like to me as well. So yeah, there's multiple lines you can take through there, but you got to be able to brake properly. And as we see, Lori just speaking of a little too deep into a corner. That's what happens when you go too deep. So just off the track, catches the car. Luckily, the grass is there to help save him from going into the barrier. So he's able to get back on the track. Lost a little bit of time in a few positions, but can safely rejoin and continue the race.
Ooh, Chris Murakami has had an off. He's now dropped down. He was running solidly inside the top 10. He's now down to P22 there. So the driver that started second at the Masters at the very start of this race has dropped back like a rock. That's not ideal for him. We may have to take a look at a replay to see what in the world happened to him. I think it was coming through turn number 3, and we're taking a look now. There's Chris Murakami there in that very bold-looking rising sun car, and I think, he had a little bit of help there. Was that Jurg I think that gave him a little bit of a tap there?
27 car, Bortolo is who that was behind him. So it's once again, when you have a track that it will allow you to take different lines, there's going to be different braking points for each car depending on what line they're going to take. And sometimes you get a little miscommunication between the drivers, and you get some little taps like that. And once you get the load shifted over, the weight load shifted over to one set of tires, any kind of jostling from another car, a little bump or anything like that, just sends the car spinning.
I think so far this race has been fairly clean. Again, I probably just jinxed it. We're going to see a multi-car pileup coming through turn number 3 in just a few moments' time. But about 6.5 minutes into this, it's Aeronome leading him at 0.3. Actually, it's teetering around a quarter second that he leads over Sam Spinall. And this is the main pack here, right towards the tail end of the top 10. It's a massive fight, I believe. Actually, it's Julian Ditchburn has broken away from this. He's right ahead of McConnell. Well, in terms of the track position, he's quite a long ways up the road there. But McConnell's the front of this pack here as we're breaking up a little bit. I did say not very long ago that the top 23 were covered by less than 10 seconds. Now, as things stand, it's a top 17. Still a very close pack as things stand. Only 7 minutes into this race. I'm sure it's going to spread out quite a lot as these drivers start to fade away, and maybe some pit stops may be popping up in the not too distant future. We usually see about the minute 12, minute 13 mark is usually when some of these drivers start to come in. So Charles, if you were one of these drivers, do you think you'd go with the undercut strategy, or do you think you'd actually try and hold off a little bit, as Aeronome is actually holding off there? I'll hold off on that question there as we're seeing this front pack start to heat up a little bit. Yanshi Lin, it looked like he was going to try and go for a move around down the inside heading into the final corner, but I think he may have screwed himself over a little bit. He now may be a sitting duck compared to Kabank, who actually puts 2 wheels into the dirt there on the start-finish straightaway. Ooh, as we have a big schmozzle there farther in the back. I'm not sure who that was spinning as they went out of the final corner. I think Walker and Carvalho are involved in that, as I'm seeing them drop down like a rock through the running order. Tom Lurie may have been involved in it as well. A lot of stuff going on there so far in this race. That final corner, I mentioned it right before we grabbed the green and on that small little track map, track guide that we did at the very start of this broadcast during the qualifying session. Oop, as Fernandez is going off, coming through turn number 2. But that final corner is, it can be very frustrating for plenty of these drivers. Taking a look now at the replay, this may have been Fernandez and his off coming through turn number 2 here. And this was, I think he may have just overshot it here a little bit. Ooh, carrying a lot of speed there into the dirt, into the gravel. I think that's kind of a copy of what we saw not very long ago. I forget who it was that went off coming through turn 1 and 2. Now, I think it may have been Laurie, if I'm not mistaken, that went off there in the not too distant past, as we're seeing. This is a replay, I believe, of the final corner schmozzle. Sadly, I think the replay is a little bit glitched out my end. Can you see it, Charles?
Yeah, that was Wall Bolt. Just solo crash. It looked like he caught a curb and unsettled the car. Tried to continue making the corner and just lost it as we get to Laurie here in the battle with Fernandez, I believe, and there's a car off the track. And it was I could not catch that other car number, but Laurie just made the basic maneuver. Fernandez was in front, and it's the other car that I was looking at Carvalho. Okay, so Carvalho went off the track, came back on. Laurie made a defensive move to try and just get out of the way and caught the inside curb. Might have been the one that you were talking about before the race. It just kind of killed the car and lost control and caused a collision. So that's how that all that unfolded. And to go back to your question from earlier, I don't know. You really need a couple of factors for a successful undercut. You need obviously to have cars that you can draft with if there's drafting on the track. This track does have a couple pretty nice straightaways that they can get a good tow from cars in front, but then you had to be able to have some heavy braking zones to allow you to make moves around cars. And I don't know, from what I've seen so far during the race, if this track is going to be conducive for that. Though maybe the undercut strategy won't work here. Obviously, we know that there'll be a couple of drivers that come in early because they just always do. But I don't know that this is one of those that if I'm up in the lead group that I would want to just drop out and try and find my way through some maybe slower traffic.
Honestly, I'm with you there, Charles. You brought up a great point right at the end, and that is traffic here at this circuit, which isn't the longest in the world. I'll fact-check myself here real quick. It's 2.3 miles, 14 corners here at Motorsports Arena Oschersleben, so not a whole lot of room to have any sort of breathing room. I'm getting my words confused here, but there's no breathing room. There's no place to have any sort of just an area to breathe and relax here. So if you go for that undercut strategy, you have to do it under the assumption that you're going to have clean track throughout the rest of this, and considering the cars that we've seen go off already and have incidents, I think there probably isn't a single part of the circuit that isn't occupied by a car. We see some drivers occupying the pits right now. That's Grinnan, who's currently P29 in the number 947 car. He's come in for an early stop. Did he have a little bit of damage from an incident, or is this a conscious call to come down pit road? If so, that would be a very bold call from the driver who hasn't had the best race in the world, if we're being honest. I believe he was running outside the top 20 before he came into the pits here. So going for an off-the-wall strategy, it could work. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, you never know. Sometimes it works out kind of against all the relevant data that you would have, and sometimes it just works out that you get some help and you have cars. If you're in the back and you've got some good pace, you get the clear air. And then as you approach cars come in and pit just to keep from having to worry about, the overtakes and potentially having any issues. And then sometimes they just want to fight you every corner. So, it's like I said, it's a strategy. Whether it's going to work, we'll find out in about 27 minutes or so.
This is an awesome fight here between Spinel and Lynn. They're going side by side, coming through 1 and 2, which has to be incredibly sketchy here in these Formula Ford cars, full of fuel, with some tires that are starting to fall off the cliff a little bit here, going side by side through that section. Single file through that section is difficult enough, but go side by side in these open wheel race cars, it takes a lot of commitment to do that and get through it clean, and that's what Spinel and Lynn did. They're still running P2 and P3. We've got a train forming here with Gnome. I used to do an old joke on these broadcasts, pulling out a harmonica and making some train noises whenever I saw something like this. Sadly, I can't find my harmonica, but this is an awesome train that we've had right now. It's Gnome at the front still. I mean, I think he's probably led the most amount of laps as things stand at the moment, 13 and a half minutes in, but between himself and Green, it's less than 2 seconds separating the top 6. Monty is enjoying the ride right now. He's running in the midst of that fight, and he's just relaxing right now. Actually, I will correct myself. It's Julian Ditchburn that's at the tail of this field. He is 2.4 seconds back of Gnome, who still leads it, and Jorg Monty is just getting tugged away. He has a nice gap between himself and Antonio Reese. I think it's currently about 5 seconds. I'm doing the math in my head. Yeah, about 5 seconds between himself and Antonio Reese, but the gap time-wise isn't as valuable as the just amount of cars behind him. He's got the likes of Green and Ditchburn, the tail cars of this train that we have at the front of the field. Then you've got McConnell, West, Tolo, Kramer. All of those drivers are separating himself and Antonio Reese there. So Monty, I think at this stage, feeling quite comfortable with the lead he has in the Masters category.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Yeah, we kind of talked about it last week. If it weren't for bad luck, Jorg Monty wouldn't have any luck at all this season. He's just been, it's one thing after another, gets caught in other people's wrecks. Had a mistake on his own last week at CTMP, and then the abduction occurred along with several other drivers. It was just one of those races where the iRacing server just decided that it wanted to work a little less, and so it removed some cars from the track. And it happens occasionally. Technology is not flawless, and so we have to go and do with what we have. So he's sitting in a really good spot now, leading the Masters class and running P5, and he's right in that lead group. So it's he's in a good spot. He's in one of his normal spot. He's up to the front of the field, which is where he normally is.
Technical difficulties, I think, are an iRacer's boogeyman. That is for darn sure. None of these drivers want to have any sort of issues like they had in Canadian Tire last time out. However, I think the issues that surrounded the Canadian Tire race may pull up here. Not the connection issues, but I think the matter of just finding a place to breathe and a place to relax. This field is still incredibly close up towards the front right now. The top 13 separated by only 7.5 seconds. But with the incident that we've seen so far, you've got like True and Bategna there are currently running in P24 and P25 as we see the Spinel and Lynn battle continue here. Lynn, a little bit of contact I think they made coming through turn number 3 there. Lynn still on the inside. He has to back out it there before they go into the triple section of turns 4, 5, and 6 there. But right now the field is starting to spread out a little bit. I think we may have to pull up the track map graphic that we have to show. I think there's probably no section of the circuit where there's actually no, you can see there between Bategna there is currently running in P25, and then the driver running in P26. It's a pretty big gap that's between turn 13, the second to last corner, all the way through turn number 2. Besides that, though, it is absolute chaos here all throughout this field. Cars, it feels like a giant parade that these drivers are having to negotiate with. Speaking of negotiating with, Paul Jackson there currently running P29 farther towards the back of this field. One of the drivers to come into the pits at the very start of this race, he is going to fall into the crutches of the massive train of cars who actually comes into the pits there. So I think maybe this could be just a very friendly version, I guess it would be, of blue flag rules here, or maybe Paul Jackson coming in for an interesting strategy call.
No, I think that's absolutely that was absolutely what he did. Was he knew that coming in on lap 1 he wasn't going to make it to the end. So he said, "Okay, I've got the leader train coming up behind me. I'll go ahead and take my pit stop now. So we'll use that as a blue flag. Let those guys go by and continue their race, and I'll come in and I'll take my stop for service, get the rest of my fuel for the rest of the race, and then I'll go back out." And I think that was a smart play on Jackson's part, heads up driving, to just let those guys go. And, so going back to the technical difficulties things, how many times have you gone to the track and could race because of a 2-hour part failure? I mean, it's really what we're dealing with here in sim racing is, internet goes down or issues with, connections or issues with computer. And it's the same thing as going to the track and having to say, "Well, I can't race this weekend because my throttle linkage broke." And so I've got to go to the local auto parts store and get a new one.
I was looking at Paul Jackson negotiate that pit exit, and I'll tell you, technical issues can make an iRacer sad, mechanical issues can make a real racer sad, and that pit exit makes me sad. I think that will probably catch at least one of these drivers here when the pit stops come, because that is incredibly narrow. If you dip a little bit, it's razor thin margins separating these drivers from having an incident that may ruin their race. And I think when it comes to the pits, we'll see a driver just go like a millimeter off, and they may pick up a penalty for an unsafe pit exit, or they may just hit the wall and pick up some damage that they have to come into the pits to repair. We could see a lot of stuff. I guarantee that blue pit exit cone is not going to be there when the checkered flag comes out in about 21 minutes time. This is another train that we have right behind the front 7 train. This is McConnell, West, Tulo, Kramer, and Antonio Reese, who's currently running P12 at the back of it right now. I think Reese at this stage maybe he's taking a little bit easy. What he could be doing here is just enjoying the fuel numbers he must be getting, seeing those 4 Formula Ford cars punch a big hole in the air right in front of him. I think maybe that could be the reason why Antonio Reese isn't fighting this as much as we may think he may do. What do you think, Charles?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, because there's enough draft on this track that if you get out on your own, you might be faster than that group that you're racing with. You might not be as fast as the group that's up front when they're together and you're by yourself. So it just makes sense to stay in here and just save some fuel and then you can race these guys at the end of the race and get these spots. And if something happens up front, you get a couple of freebies as well.
Ooh, there's a nice fight outside actually just barely inside the top 15. This is Foy and Barney battling hard. This is for P2 and P3 in the S2 category and P14 and P15 on the racetrack. They're one of the only drivers inside the top 15 between themselves, Kabanka and West, and Ditchburn as well, who haven't lost or gained position so far in this race. There's been a lot of movers and shakers so far. You can see Bentegna there in P number 25, up 10 positions from where he started this race. So this track may be a little bit inducive to that. We mentioned how mistakes could be quite important here and could be a big factor here in this race, but we also see some decent overtaking opportunities here at this circuit. So Charles, I'll pass this off to you real quick. Do you think mistakes from these drivers are the reason why we're seeing a lot of movers and shakers, or do you think this track actually has some sneaky overtaking opportunities for these drivers to use?
I think it's more mistakes than it is anything else. And these drivers are really, from top to bottom, these are really good drivers. But yeah, I think it's mistakes. Like we've seen a few where the cars have got together, as we see.
I think this is a spin here from Bentegna, possibly. It's that's not ideal. So he's had up and down race so far. However, as I point out, up 10 positions from where he started this race. He's cut through the field like a hot knife through butter. So I think this is, we may have to take a look at that again. Sadly, I think both Charles and I, our replays are a tad glitched out here. So we'll just imagine that it's Bentegna just cutting his way through the field quite smoothly here. So we're just seeing, well, the viewers are seeing some nice moves, and I think they will be enjoying these moves because pulling off very bold overtakes in a Formula Ford car, which is kind of like a spider with the wheels sticking so far out compared to the rest of the car, it's very tricky to do and very easy to make just a tiny bit of wheel-to-wheel contact, which could end up in you pulling some gymnastics moves in the runoffs area here of the circuit. But Bentegna up quite a long ways so far. We'll see if he can claw up some positions once these pit stops start. He's only about 9 seconds back of True, currently running in P24 here. So I think it may not be, I think we may have seen most of the on-track overtakes. However, once the pit stops start, we could see him claw his way up through the field even more.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing about these cars is you think that these guys get a gap and just kind of run away, and it happens sometimes, but more often than not is you get one car that gets himself a bit of a gap around the rest of the field, and the rest of the field just reels them back in, and so it ends up just being that big draft train, where it's 6 or 7 cars deep. And then they start battling amongst themselves. So the cars that are 3 or 4 seconds back now start making their way forward as well and bringing more and more cars into that, and ends up being quite the battle during the end part of the race. So it's something we'll watch out for as we see Walker coming back onto the track after his pit stop.
You can see that was trying to find a way to get any sort of tire temperature. I will say one thing about the pit entry and exit here at this track. I think because there's so many twists and turns, it may not be too hard for these drivers to keep it on the road once they rejoin the racetrack, because you've got a very tight left and right-hander right as you exit the pit. So I think that's more than enough opportunity for the tires on these Formula Ford cars to heat up. We'll just have to wait and see once the vast majority of this field comes in. We're getting to that stage of the race, 24 minutes into this 40-minute race now, and we're seeing drivers feel a little bit racy. That was Dren Kramer. It looked like he was going for a move there on Tulo there to move into the top 10. Kramer won last time out at Canadian Tire, and right now he's fighting to try and find any way in the book to break into the top 10. We'll see if he can get it done before the pit stops come in the not too distant future. And Charles, if you're one of these drivers involved in this massive fight, would you start to feel a little bit racy and try and push the issue a little bit more, or do you think you should just kind of like remain on the low and have a clean race car when you come into the pits in a few moments?
Yeah, I think for me, I want a clean race car for the second half of the race, because it doesn't take a lot of damage for these cars to get, a lot of contact for these cars to get wheel and suspension damage. Obviously they have the fast repair they can take, but just from the time you have the damage to get back into the pits, if you're able to drive it, you're very, very slow. So you're going to lose so much time that there's not really much way you're going to make that back. So I think these guys are doing the right thing, just kind of riding in line, saying, you know what, once we get our pit stop done, we'll start doing some racing. Then as we see this, it looks like they're trying to drop Green off the back of this, and Green is not so much this season as previous seasons, but is one of those guys who's really, really good at his fuel conservation. Always is one of the quickest pit stops because he doesn't have to take as much fuel. So I wonder if that may be why they're just he's just letting them go. He's like, I'm hitting a number, so that way when I come into the pits, I know what I can take and how much it's going to be, and it's going to be quicker than everybody else, and I'll make this time back up. So once again, still kind of in line fighting, or I should say in line not really doing a lot of fighting, and Green's able to just kind of hang on the end of this group.
Speaking of letting it go, what in the world has happened to Julian Ditchburn? He was involved in this fight. He was right behind Green not very long ago, and as things stand right now, he may fall at risk of losing a position to McConnell here. He has had a terrible turn of pace as of late. He was, again, within about 2 seconds of the leaders. He was involved in that fight, whereas I think Kabanka may have had a mistake there. I think Kabanka may have had a spin coming around the final corner, but this is what happened to Ditchburn. This is what hurt him earlier on here in this race. Sadly, I think the replay may be glitched out from my perspective again. So, yep. Charles, can you see what's going on here?
No, I've got the same issue as well.
Ugh. According to our producer Josh, it's a back marker issue. Traffic, we mentioned it a lot in qualifying, and we have to mention it again here in this race. Traffic playing a role at this circuit, which is a little bit wide for these Formula Ford cars. However, it's definitely not the widest circuit in the world. So sadly for Julian Ditchburn, just getting caught out a teeny tiny bit by that lap traffic, and it's hurt him quite a lot. He was running solidly inside a great position. Sadly, it's come to blows. Speaking of a driver that was running involved in that nice fight, it was Kabanka, who was running fourth throughout a vast majority of this race and even challenging the leaders at the very start. He's come into the pits, so he's the first to break away from that fight. Brazarosco and Brad Cathcart coming in as well. So we're seeing these drivers start to flood into the pits here. I think it's more of a trickle right now, and it's going to turn into a flood in the not too distant future. 27.5 minutes on the board of this 40-minute race, so we are getting to crunch time, and I'm sure in the next 3 minutes, this is when we're going to see a whole lot of cars come into the pits. I'm sure we got to see a driver come side by side coming through this pit exit. We may see that. What do you think, Charles? Will we see some drivers battling on pit exits?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Pit exit's so tricky. I don't know that I would want to try making any kind of moves. I just let me get back out on the track and get the little more heat back in the tires as we see Nom coming into the pits. And I'm trying to see who that behind.
I believe that's West.
West as well. So yeah, so pit stops are really starting to pick up now. Saw Kabanka come in a little earlier. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see Knob backing up. So you overshot his box, had to back up. That's going to cost him about a second or so.
That is going to hurt him a lot. We're going to see, you got the graphics on the left-hand side of your screen with these SDK graphics, and you can see, is it going to be, it's over 40 seconds spent down pit road. We'll compare that to West, who was running a little bit farther back out. You can see Kabanka there was in the pits for 38.7 seconds there. So Gnome getting hurt just a teeny tiny bit. He's going to lose out quite a lot there. Kabanka overtakes him there to move into P16 as things stand at the moment. Of course, the top 15 have yet to come down pit road. But Gnome, it's a matter of inches that can separate you from having a shot to win this race to just trying to stay alive in the podium fight, and I think that may be what Gnome has to do throughout this race. He was leading it through a vast majority, but a tiny little mistake there goes a little bit deep into his pit box, and now he's going to be locked steady in a nice fight between himself and Christian Kabanka, still trying to warm up those tires, get those tires back up to temperature, and once they join up with that fight of the cars that are at the front of the field and yet to come in, that is going to be a very intense fight between these two for that final podium position. Green has now come into the pits, currently running P at number 4. He's going to drop down the running order. He was the back car of that fight as McConnell's now come in. He was the top car of the train right behind, so we're seeing these drivers slowly come into the pits. They're going with these different strategies. We'll see, hopefully, Jason Green, for his sakes, he hits his marks perfectly there. So the American in the number 160 car down in the pits, and we'll wait for him to get away away here in the not too distant future. McConnell also into the pits here as well. We'll see. Okay, Green is already away and barreling his way back onto the race circuit. I think it's fairly quick. Yeah, you can see Green 37.7 seconds stopped while down pit road there, so that's very fast from him. Over it's a second quicker than Cabanca, so Green actually jumping both Cabanca and Gnome there. I think it's always going to be borderline here on pit exit. Will Cabanca go for a move? Will Gnome go for a move on Cabanca? That is looking like it timed out beautifully there for Jason Green.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously I just talked about this a couple of laps ago. Green very good on the fuel mileage, was able to take a quicker pit stop, so that got him out in front of Cabanca, and the error that Nom made and coming into the pits having to back up, and that was, he was leading the race, and you see now that allowed Cabanca to sneak through. So now that's kind of flipped everything upside down. So now we've still got Spinel, Lynn, and Monty still out on track of that lead group. And we see Monty coming in now.
The leader of the Masters category throughout a vast majority of this race was running in third. That's a very good result there for the Masters driver. You mentioned earlier on in this broadcast, Charles, that if Monty didn't have bad luck, he would have no luck at all. He's been hit by many falling anvils throughout this race, knowing my luck, his car is just going to explode into a million pieces when he goes down pit road. Speaking of, it is a flood. The flood is beginning here, and Julian Ditchburn coming in. He is the leader of the S2 category right now. His race is actually taken over the lead in Masters. You can see the likes of Murakami, Stano, Foy, and Bose down the pits as well here. So it is a flood coming down pit road now. We'll see who exits the front of this. Good Lord, oh my God, that's 3 wide between Cabanca, Gnome, and Green going down the start-finish straight away. And luckily for Jason Green, he backed out of that, because I think they got away with it. Luckily so, they got away with going 3 wide at the very start of this race. I think towards the end of it, going 3 wide into turn 1 and 2 is more of a death wish than anything else. But Jorg Monty, I think, may have been hurt by that quite a lot. You saw the likes of Green and Cabanca and Gnome just blow his doors off, and now Monty is well farther back, 57.5 seconds down pit road. What the hell happened to Jorg Monty? It's that falling anvil again. He's going to be cursing that thing out after this race is done.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It was just based on their stoppage time. He was in the box an extra 17 or 18 seconds versus the rest of the field, and I don't know what that could have been. I mean, it's not like there's that like a 17-second penalty of some type. So that's just a very strange. The only thing I'm thinking maybe is he maybe didn't uncheck his tires or something like that. So I'm not sure. Obviously, there was a mistake there somewhere. As we see Spinel coming into his box, got the first box in there, so he's going to make his stop. And that will be leave Yangshi Lin as the only car yet to pit.
That is gonna sting if you're Jorg Monty. It's a matter. We've said throughout this broadcast, it can be a matter of inches on track. It could be a matter of pixels not actually hitting that don't change tire buns button. He didn't hit that properly. That may have been the reason why he had an incredibly slow pit stop. That, or he just took way more fuel than he wanted to. Only about, well, less than 10 minutes left here on the clock. 6.5 minutes as things stand at the moment. So maybe that's what happened to Jorg Monty. Either way, he was running in P3 when he came into the pits. He's now running in P10. Of course, they still have Yangshi Lin leading this race right now, yet to come in. But Jorg Monty, that is going to be a kick in the shins. I would say a different area of the body, but I'm not sure if I can get away with that here on Apex Racing TV. But still, Monty, that is going to sting. He was going to be involved in a fight to fight for a podium. Now he's going to be struggling to keep inside the top 10. And if things go disastrously wrong, you could see Murakami, who's running P14 and second in the Masters. We could see Murakami, after an incident earlier on in this race, we could see him get involved in that fight to win in Masters. That would be a very dramatic turn of things there in that category. Speaking of, Yangshi Lin is now coming to the pits. Those tires, actually no, it was mainly the fuel. I think he was running on fumes by the time he finally came in. So Yangshi Lin, who spent a vast majority of that race in the draft, was able to stay out of the pits for a while. Spinel only stopped for 10.6 seconds there. So that is a very quick quick stop there from the Brit. You can see Monty 32.0. Ouch, that is going to sting. Lynn is now at the pits, basically equal on time going down pit road, only 2/10 quicker there for Sam Spittle here. Will he be able to take the lead of this race? Yanchi Lin exiting, he's going to get it done there. So Sam Spittle actually taking it a little bit narrow there going through turn number 2. I don't know, maybe I'm a bit of a dirty driver, but I think I will have just run all the way out there and block Yanchi Lin there. But you know, that's just me. There's a very good reason why I'm in the commentary booth instead of behind the wheel of one of these race cars. But Sam Spittle, with about 5 minutes left to go here on this clock, is taking the lead of this race with pit stops out of the way. However, he only has about 4/10 separating himself and Yanchi Lin. So will we see that fight heat up, Charles?
Yep, no doubt. I mean, these guys, they're, you know, the guys up front that are up there week in and week out, they race to win. So yeah, there'll be some battling, there'll be some chances taken. Hopefully, it doesn't end in tears for anybody. So, but there'll be, if there's a place that they can make a move, they'll absolutely try it.
We may see some fisticuffs break out throughout this entire field. This is Stano battling here with Ditchburn. This is at the front of S2 here as they go through the triple section there. As I'm running out of wind in my lungs, they're going through turn number 7 now. We're seeing Stano get really, really racy. Ditchburn, at one point, he was running in P7, I believe, and was just at the tail end of that train and pulling away from the rest of the field. Then he gets caught out by a lapped car and is now at risk of losing the win here in the S2 category. Stano may have a great run here going on to the back straightaway, gets a drift from the car in front of him, and they're now going to be side by side heading through turn number 11. Stano drifting it as they will go through that corner and woe it up coming through that section. He was sideways, and actually I think that sideways slide he had coming through turn number 11 may have been the reason he wasn't able to get the move done there. So Ditchburn reclaiming P11, reclaiming P1 in the S2 category. But this fight is far from over. They're still going side by side, going on to the start finish straightaway with about 3.5 minutes left on the clock. This crunch time for all of these drivers, and we're going to see them try and battle as hard as they can. I think we're also seeing a battle farther up towards the front of the field. Spinel and Lynn are trading blows right now. I feel bad for our producer Josh, who has to be like a chameleon looking at 14,000 bajillion different things at once. Spinel now leading them coming out of turn number 7. I think they're going to be taking the white flag, not this time by, but the time after that. So it's again getting to crunch time here in this race, and we're going to take a look at a replay of the Spinel and Lynn fight. This is going down that small little flat out stretch between turns 3 and 4. Lynn peaks a wheel or 2 or 4 down the inside going into the triple section. Those two nearly came to blows on 5 separate occasions going through that section. They are lucky that they got away with that without having those cars spear off into the barriers there. Sam Spinel still leading as things stand at the moment. However, only a quarter of a second separating himself and Yanchi Lin. This fight is going to be capital H hot between now and the checkered flag.
Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be another few chances here as we get to this. We got 1 to go after this, so this will be 2 laps left as we're seeing Spindle and Lynn, and this battle is just heating up. See Kabanka and Green back here battling for P4 and P5. Ooh, just very, very tight. Kabanka able to get that move made with no damage to either car, but that was very close coming through 1.
Yeah, Kabanka and Gnome were involved in a fight for the final podium position. Gnome won out in that as he's now pulling away about a second between himself and Kabanka with not a whole lot of time left to go. We have about a lap and a half left to go, probably about 5 overtaking opportunities for these drivers to use realistically, but there's still also plenty of opportunities for these drivers to make a mistake. And this was a battle between Gnome and Kabanka, which resulted in Gnome pulling away here around the outside, heading into turn number 3. That is a bold and audacious move there to stick it around the outside. Ooh, and that was a little bit of contact there as it came out of turn number 3. Kabanka drifting a teeny tiny bit out to Aero Gnome, who didn't want to go off the track and pick up that 1X in the dying stage of this race. And now Aero Gnome negotiating some of the lap traffic going down the back straightaway. Those two nearly came to blows. I think Kabanka should be thanking his lucky stars that he wasn't just a teeny tiny bit more sideways. Otherwise, he probably would have speared off into the barriers and wouldn't be running P4. He'd probably be in the pits and not not exchanging some not very kind words in the chat there. Kabanka would probably be very upset if a 40-minute race ended like that with about 3 or 4 laps left to go. But right now we are on the white flag. It's one more time around. 14 corners for these drivers to negotiate and plenty of opportunities to sneak a wheel down the inside of your competitors. Yanxi Lin very close there to the back of Spindle. They've been separated by about a quarter of a second for the past lap and a half here. So will Yanxi Lin go for the dive? Heading into turn number 3, closes up a teeny tiny bit. I think he's focusing on the exit here. He went for the move going into the triple, and it didn't work out. It's not going to happen this time by because he ran very wide coming through turn number 3. A very tricky corner to get right. The track feels like it falls away from you when you leave that banking, the slight little bit of banking they have coming through turn number 3. And I think Yanxi Lin may have been caught out by that. However, he has closed up that gap between himself and Sam Spindle. Arrow Gnome is pretty much driving off into the sunset. He will be well clear of Kabanka and Green, who are still very close right behind him. And then Spindle and Lin are going to be battling quite hard right in front of him. If these two drivers come to blows, which, hey, we've seen crazier things happen here in the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors. It could be Gnome picking up the pieces, but now Yanxi Lin closing. He is going to be sending it through the final 4 corners here of this race. Spindle leading on coming out of that very stretched out chicane at the end of the back straightaway for the final time. Heading through turn number 13, the last time by Yanxi Lin, pushing that Formula Ford car to the absolute limit and even into the gravel as it came out the second to last corner. But with a great exit coming out of the final turn, you can book it for Sam Spindle, who's going to win this Formula Ford Weekend Warriors race in very dramatic fashion there, less than 0.4 of a second, separating himself and Yanxi Lin when they took the checkered flag. After 40 minutes of heart-pumping racing action, Arrow Gnome will round out your podium, and that's going to be Kabanka and Green rounding out the top 5, very close right behind there. That was Kramer and West there, separated by barely any air. McConnell was involved in that as well, and we're looking through the rest of the field. Tim Stano wasn't able to challenge Ditchburn after that side-by-side action we saw a few laps ago, and Ditchburn is going to end up being the winner. Ooh, actually, you can see there, I think that may have been Jorg Mani going very slowly as he came to the start-finish line. I think he may have already taken the checkered flag when he lifted off dramatically there. That would have been very disheartening there for Jorg Mani if he ended up losing the Masters category with about 100 feet left to go here in this race. But he still finishes P10 and takes the win in that Masters category. It was Ditchburn ending up taking the win there in S2 with a very dramatic race himself. And wow, Charles, I'll tell you what, I wasn't really sure what to expect coming into this race. We were expecting mistakes and really not a whole lot else. We haven't seen many races here at this circuit since it's been so very new here to iRacing for plenty of these drivers. A little bit cleaner than I was expecting, it must be said, and a lot more action-packed than I was expecting as well.
Yeah, really good flow to this track. It's just, like you said, sometimes you expect some mistakes to happen, but yeah, I think we had a couple incidents where we had some, wheel-to-wheel contact, a couple spins here and there, but overall, very clean race. We had the one incident at the beginning, which is, after the day I've had, 2 or 3 cars crash on lap 1. Not that big of a deal. But yeah, it's, it was a really good race. Like I said, it's a good flowy track, and you could see the guys really working, trying to just get the weight shifted and sliding the car around. It looked like they were having some fun out there, so it was a good race.
Honestly, at a track like this with not a whole lot of heavy braking opportunities and not very tight corners as well, I was expecting these drivers to struggle to pass each other. However, that was not the case. All these Formula Ford Weekend Warriors drivers giving it absolutely everything they could, and I think it put on a pretty good race. So you can see some more drivers puttering around this circuit. Pretty much all the cars, I believe, have taken the checkered flag, and we'll try and get the results for you from this very interesting Formula Ford Weekend Warriors race here at Oschersleben, defying my expectations, and I'm sure entertaining the viewers watching the stream here on Apex Racing TV. And it ended up being the Brit of Sam Spindle taking the win there. Only 0.39, trying to get it right now, 0.349 separating himself and Yanxi Lin there. It's a very close gap regardless. After 40 minutes of racing action, those two locked steady in a fantastic fight. It would have been nice to see them go side by side on that last lap. However, Spindle was in control of it and ends up taking the checkered flag. That's Arrow Gnome there in P number 3. He had to earn that podium after dropping back, after missing his marks there on pit road. He still rounds out your podium in 3rd. That's Christian Kabanka, who I think may be one of the only drivers to stay in the same position from start to finish. He finishes in 4th, Jason Green in 5th, Bobby West in 6th, Trent Kramer in P number 7, Michael McConnell in 8th, Thor Tula will finish this race in P number 9, and then Jorg Mani is going to end out this race in P number 10. Julian Ditchburn ends up taking the checkered flag, the top of the drivers in the S2 category. Tim Stana was close, but just wasn't enough there in the late stages of this race. He ends up in 12th and P2 in the S2 category. Chris Murakami finishes not a long ways back of Jorg Mani, the top of the Masters. However, he still gets a pretty good P13 result on P2 in the Masters category. David Foy in P14, and then Adam Barney rounding out your top 15.
Yeah, Philip Fernandez in 16th, Benjamin Harris in 17th, Dana Bose gets the final step on the podium for Masters in 18th, Brad Cathcart in 19th, Bill Walker in 20th. Starting your next 20, Wilson Bruzarosco in 21st, Alan Gagassis 22nd, Pedro Carvalho 23rd, Peter True 24th, Manning Grennan 25th, Johan Batinga in 26th, Nick Tolo in 27th, Jeff Jacobson in 28th. Roll to the next page. We've got Paul Jackson in 29th, Paul Stevens in 30th, Antonio Race in 31st, Tom Laurie 32nd, Russ Telker 33rd, Gary Walbolt 34th, Lou Hawley 35th, John Toms, Morn Human, and David Kahn did not take the start, and they finished 36th through 38th.
So those are the results here from this race at Oschersleben. Defied our expectations. I'm sure these drivers were expecting a little bit of a different race than we saw. I think we may be able to have a chat with just a few of these drivers before we wrap things up here from the first part of the Weekend Warriors here this Sunday. Charles, would you like to have a chat with our winner here, Sam Spinell?
Oh, absolutely. Sam, congratulations. That was a hard fought victory today. Looked like there was several cars out there that gave you a run for your money, but you were able to get a good pit stop and get out to the front and make it stick.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole entire race was fuel saving for pretty much everyone. I voluntarily gave up the lead, and I think Nam didn't really want it either. So I just tried to keep second. I think Yang Shi Lin fuel saved better than me because I crossed the line with 0.3 litres, and I knew at 0.2 it'd start spitting, so I still had to fuel save when I was in front. But it's very strategical.
Yeah, well, it's kind of fairly new to this track. We don't see a lot of racing here. So, I knew that there were some drivers out there who were pretty good about doing fuel saving, but I didn't realize that we were fuel saving all the way from the front of the pack, all the way back several positions. So that's an interesting observation there. So, what did you think about the track? Did you get any time here prior to this race?
Yeah, I've been on it. I think I've done 20 races, won 19, so I felt pretty confident coming in. But I'm quite happy. I've done 4 races now in Apex, won 4. Most of them all have been through fuel saving. So I think until others start stealing the strategy, I think it should be all right. But it was a really, really fun race.
Well, congratulations. Do you have anybody you want to thank or give a shout out to?
Yeah, my girlfriend for letting me on the sim. But thank you, and to you guys for putting on such a great event.
All right, well, thank you, Sam. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That was Sam Spinell, ended up taking the win in the S1 category and the win overall. And he mentioned Yanqi Lin, who he was the driver fighting very hard at the end of that. We'll bring in Yanqi Lin for a quick little chat after this race. Yanqi, thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth, involved in a fantastic finish towards the end of this race. How was it out there?
I mean, this track looks nothing like a Rootskugen, but the racing here certainly reminds me a lot of that track. There's absolutely nowhere to overtake. I tried everything in the end. I think, Sam is a little bit faster than me, but other tracks with a slipstream, at least I will have a chance. Here there's no chance.
So from your perspective, there's just no opportunity at all to overtake, no real heavy braking zones heading into those sharp bends. And do you think that was the reason why you couldn't end up finishing P1 in this race?
I don't know. I mean, if I actually treated this very seriously, like practice like a million hours, then maybe I can find a few tenths. But I showed up like 20 minutes into the practice and just started driving. So as the race goes, I'm still figuring out where to brake for every corner. And I mean, it's just pretty close. I mean, the start was a little bit messy. I think Sam slowed down a little bit and he accelerated. And I thought he's going to go, and then I lifted, and then I get on throttle, and I saw he lifted, and then I lifted, and then he started going. So that kind of messed me up a little bit. And then I overfueled by half a liter. Maybe that will give me half a tenth to get me side by side on the pit exit with him. But I still really enjoyed it, despite I finished second, I don't know, for the third time this season. It was an exciting race.
Well, you're still up towards the front of the S1 standings. You've been very militarily consistent throughout this entire season. We saw that again here tonight at Oschersleben. Now, I think probably to the horror of you after you were talking about Rudskogen being very similar to this track. We're heading to Rudskogen next week, so what are your thoughts heading into that race in Norway?
I'm not gonna be there because I really dislike the track.
Fair enough. I can't really blame you, Yanshi. So hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks' time when the series rocks up to Belle Isle on May the 5th. So we won't be seeing you next time at Rudskogen. Thankfully, you drivers have a few drop rounds to deal with here in this championship, so it won't hurt you too bad. So Yanshi, thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth. Is there anyone you want to give a thanks to or shout out?
Thank to Mr. Stevie Ray organizing this league. Thank you broadcasting it, obviously, and thank to the series sponsors to make it possible. Otherwise, I wouldn't even finish second in a race that was never held.
Amen, Yanshi. You always have to have some fantastic sponsors to put on the fantastic racing we have. Yanshi, thank you for joining us. Hope to see you in 2 Formula Ford races at Belle Isle in a couple weeks' time, and hopefully we can see you on track for the Ray Esports event this upcoming Tuesday. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That was Yanshi Lin, who was involved in that finish, and I think he may have been part of that very vocal minority or majority, depending on how you look at, that is not a fan of Oschersleben. It's kind of like Marmite of a circuit. Some people hate it, some people love it. Charles, after watching your first ever race here at Oschersleben, do you love it or do you hate it? A very loaded question, I must say.
Yeah, it really is. You can't put me on the spot there. No, it's a good track. It's not probably a track that I would say I would put in my must race list. But it was a good race, and obviously every driver is different depending on what their racing style's like. So if I was saying, nah, this track's horrible, it's one person's opinion. And so I'll just keep mine to myself. How about that? So we know that Yangshi doesn't like this one or Rudskogen, so we know that for a fact.
We're building up our character development. A lot of these drivers will get their opinions on many of the racetracks that we'll be visiting here this season. I'll tell you, Oschersleben, it's a track that I had mixed views entering this race, and I think my mixed views may be continuing here. If not, they may be a little bit more amplified. I think we put on a pretty good race, though, it must be said. Some nice battling throughout this field, and some strategy playing a role in this race. You always love to see it. And I'll tell you, if you enjoyed this broadcast here of the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors, not only should you subscribe to Apex Racing TV, you should also stay tuned for the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors race coming up in just a few hours' time at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. That's going to be a very interesting race. Fingers crossed we don't have as many alien abductions as we saw from the Formula Fords when they went there last week, but fingers crossed that is also a pretty good race as well. That we'll be seeing our producer Josh in as well. Hopefully he can have a clean meeting there at Canadian Tire in not a whole lot of time from now. So as for this broadcast, I think that'll just about do it. So for myself, Ron Mullins, Charles Bichelle joining me in the commentary booth, and Josh Wilkie doing a wonderful job working all the cameras in the virtual production hall. I say thank you all so very much for watching. Have a great rest of your lunch break, per se, and we hope to see you in just a few hours' time for the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors.
Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.